Hello, everyone. This is Cody with the Faces. Entrepreneurs are people, and CEO and founder of Telehelping, a virtual staffing company, and the sponsor of this here podcast. So I appreciate them paying for it and allowing us to do this every day. I'm super excited to invite today Brett Bowman, a former Apple guy like myself. And so, Brett, welcome to the podcast.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Cody. Happy to be here.
No, great. Well, Brett, got a lot in that history about you as a person, you as a profession. So, tell us a brief introduction. Who are we talking to with here today?
Yeah, thanks for asking. I founded a company called Suncrest Capital about 5 years ago. It's really based on the premise of being able to help anyone invest in alternative assets. So we primarily focus mobile home parks, long-term RV parks, and I can talk a little bit more on why. But the
Yeah.
way we're structured is we work with everyday investors and allow them to invest passively into these assets. And then we take the capital, we co-invest, so we're investing our own money in every single project we do. And then our mission really, and what we're passionate about is to provide safe, affordable, attractive housing to people in these types of communities. So gone are the days of trailer parks. Really, we're looking much more for beautiful assets that people are proud to live in.
Well, Brett, I grew up with trailer park kids, so I know that they are not always beautiful.
Yeah,
So
for
yeah, we
sure.
used to we used to always call one of our I think we were there a long time for our childhood. It was like 3 years, right? And we used to always call it the greenhouse because it was this ugly green, and it was just like how we labeled that house, the greenhouse. And so we know about when we're telling stories and history, we're always saying, "Oh, you remember the greenhouse? This." But it was a really ugly pea green trailer.
Yeah, and sadly, those are not gone all the way. I want to say they're gone all the way, but they're not. I will say I think more and more investors coming into the space share similar attitudes that we do, where we want to make the space better. We want to get rid of the stigma. Um, so we talk a lot about the school bus tests, and which is funny because you're talking almost like a school bus impression. There is what I'm guessing from the greenhouse you just talked about, but where a kid gets off the school bus, they don't want to be like hiding their face or embarrassed that they're getting off the school bus into this trailer park, right? We want them to have beautiful trees, landscaping, the homes are nice, manicured, curated, all those kinds of things, um, to make it nice so that they're not ashamed to get off the school bus.
Yeah, I call those San Diego trailer parks. And so I'm sure, I'm in here in Napa. If I drive 15 minutes towards town, I drive by, which more common is beautified, is the 55 and over trailer
Oh yeah.
parks.
Yep.
Is that the kind of direction you go? Like it is a beautiful, good looking mobile home kind of park.
Yeah, I think that those are a good standard. And like you said, yeah, the 55 plus, typically it's easier to have a nice curated area just because, they typically are in a little bit better place in life where they can afford to have a nicer home, keep it nice, all those kinds of things. And you can also like have a lot higher standard of rules and regulations you have in the park.
Mhm.
But really, we're trying to do that with all of our parks. So I would say we're striving with several of them, thriving with some of them, and kind of still working with others. So we're at 27 parks right now that we manage, mostly in the central
Great.
U.S. So we're big in Missouri, Iowa, Kansas. Recently got into Louisiana, um, and so across those parks we have kind of a mix, but we really have plans for all of them to be beautiful and places
Well,
people want to live.
it's something that has always been a light interest to me is to own a trailer park. And so I know someone who owns a couple trailer parks in the Carolinas. And so, like, what does that look like? What is a relationship for someone who's like, I'm interested in getting involved in a trailer park? How's that process go?
Yeah, so it depends. Obviously, there's various ways you can own real estate assets. So I've been doing real estate for 20 years almost, 15, 20 years. And most people I talk to in the space that are investors, not just real estate agents, but investors, typically start with single family rentals, right? Fix flip or BRRRR strategy, which means you buy, you rehab, you rent it out, then you refinance, then you repeat it, and you just do that over and over again. That's kind of how I got started. I got into the commercial space about 7 years ago, and this is sort of where like I would recommend a lot of people look at this path when you're looking at like mobile home park investing or multifamily investing. About 7 years ago, I got into passive investing through syndications. What that means, you probably are familiar, but just quick background for maybe some of your listeners is you you bring together a larger acquisition that maybe you couldn't buy on your own, and you kind of pull together resources from 20 to 30 investors, and each person is kind of a part owner in this asset. And what's cool about doing it that way, a lot of people ask me what the differences between that and like a real estate investment trust or a REIT. And the big difference is this: you're actually directly owning it. So that gives you all the same tax benefits of being the only owner, but you're instead sharing the risk. You're able to diversify in multiple assets because you're not putting all your money in one place. And the best part is you don't have to worry with tenants, toilets, trash, any of the T's, right? Because we're doing all that for you. So you're a passive investor. Um, the way that the structure works too, from a compensation standpoint, is kind of cool. We structure where, excuse me, you have a couple different ways of getting compensation in investors. The first is a preferred return. So typically we're doing like an 8 or 9% preferred return. And the way that works is if you invest $100,000, for example, the first 8% of cash flow or 9% cash flow, what are that preferred return? And it's coming back to you. So you're going to get $9,000 a year on your preferred return, for example. And if the cash flow is not good enough for that, it's accrued. So it's owed to you. So let's say nothing comes to you year one. The next year you're owed 18,000. So you're continuing to owe that, right? And then above that, the share of cash flow is split between you and the sponsor or the operator. And so that split can be different depending on the operator, depending on the project. But what's nice about it is it's almost as guaranteed as it gets. Obviously, it's not, because it can all fall apart, right?
Nothing is.
Exactly, right. But the operator is highly incentivized to get you that, because they're not really getting paid until they meet that first hurdle. So once you're getting the 9%, for example, let's say cash flow is 15%, you get the first 9%, and then the next 6% is split, maybe 70% to you, 30% to the sponsor. So that ends up being a really big incentive for them to make sure that they're performing it. So
Yeah.
hopefully that's answering your question. I can talk more about how to buy one on your own if that's what you're asking. But
no, yeah. I mean, my wife through syndication was very interested in a vacation rental property company that was doing that, and I'm very fortunate to be in the position where I don't want to share my properties. Like I don't. Like I have houses that sit empty, right? And they sit empty because when I go in there, I want to be the one that messes up my stuff, not other people. All right. And that's also says someone who I have rental properties, right? Like Airbnb, huge in that. I also am involved in some Section 8 relationships with Greater Detroit. And so I'm involved in a syndication regarding like 50 homes. But they were flipped, refurbed, and then turned into Section 8. And so do y'all have any involvement into the Section 8 side of transitioning for the properties?
Yeah, I've invested as a passive investor in some Section 8 as well, similar to what you're doing there as a syndicator. We haven't done that as operators yet. It actually doesn't work great in a mobile home park, which is ironic, right? Because Section 8 is inherently designed for people that
it's how I
can't
paid for
afford
my
housing,
childhood
right?
home.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome.
Section 8. So.
Yeah, that's great. So the reason it doesn't work as well in a mobile home park situation is typically the owner of the mobile home park doesn't own the home. You can, and there's lots of people that prefer to, but with Section 8, you really have to own the home, because the way that's working is you're renting the lot and the home, and Section 8's paying for it. And where we don't usually own the home, we only have the lot rent. It just doesn't match. We have talked about setting aside some homes that are just for Section 8, so we're just trying to get into that process. Frankly, I'm new to it. There's a lot of paperwork, a lot of research, but we're interested in trying it out. There's actually a couple of markets we're in that I think it would do really well.
Yeah, we're in the Birmingham market, Detroit market, Memphis. So we have
This is a single family portfolio that you're doing. Okay, yeah.
Cool. I'm very passive. I actually prefer passive. I have multiple streams of income, and so I actually don't want more cash coming in, because I don't want the extra cash. I don't want to file the extra taxes. I like those long-term turnovers. Give me something that appreciation, avoid that short-term capital gains, put me out in the future somewhere. Is where I am at with my investments. I don't need to. I don't want to see something right now. I was just talking to a buddy of mine who who lost a considerable amount of six digits, right? And he's like, "Oh,
Yeah.
I can't believe it. It was guaranteed." He said it was in the bucket. I was like, as soon as you say the word investment, you should also say the word,
Risk.
loss,
Yeah.
right? Risk, exactly. Loss, like it's gone. Like, I trade every day, and I tell people all the time, like, we all get caught up in what we can make, right? I hyper focus on what I can lose, right? Because that's, you have to be willing to lose it, as you should be with any situation.
Sure.
But that's an interesting current state. I see the Apple trophy in the background for the
Yeah.
10 years, right? Talk to me about Apple. Where did that
Yeah.
play in your career path?
No, it's great. And I know that that's how we got connected too, which is really cool. So, career-wise, I well, started with education. So I studied finance first, and then did an MBA where I also did an emphasis in finance. And then, kind of around that time, I was working at American Express, doing some corporate finance roles, and then worked at a startup. I listened to you say that you were at a startup, like sixth employee, I think you said. This one I was
Yeah,
17th employee, which was still tiny for that group. So
right.
it's like totally different environment, going from a Fortune 30 at American Express to the startup. And then I'm actually still at Apple, which is really interesting. I know you said in
Oh,
the
great.
past,
Yeah.
but yeah, so I've been there 10 and a half years, just got the plaque about 6 months ago. What's cool, side note, you probably already know this, but for listeners, it's actually made from the same uh, aluminum that we make the phones out of, which is super cool. It's like solid. The thing is heavy, so you can like work out with that thing. But anyway, so it's still there. It's working great. One thing I think you'd appreciate with your telehelping business is I've actually been remote for about 6 years, which
Mm,
has worked really great for me because it makes it so that my side hustle doing this Suncrest Capital business has worked out a little bit better because I can flex and do that in the morning, evenings, weekend a little bit, lunch hour, just squeeze things in where I can. Um, and so yeah, still there. Idea is that where the way I built Suncrest, I've got a really strong team. As we've kind of expanded the portfolio, I've been able to hire people to do more and more of what I used to do. So I used to do
nice.
100%. Now I'm down to, there's about 10 hours a week worth of stuff that's really just my core focus. That is where I feel like I add the most value. So that's where I spend my time. And then, yeah, I have lots of systems and processes in place. Following Six Sigma again, I know you've talked about that a tiny bit too. That's a big thing for me too. Just making sure that we can automate and streamline and make things consistent.
Yeah. I mean, that's what I do. I'd have to say there's a good maybe 10% of the telehelping portfolio, client portfolio, that works a full-time other job. And they're oftentimes getting their virtual assistants to do all the things in the middle of the day that they really can't do. Like
Hmm. Yeah.
I myself do it as well. I have an executive project manager who responds to the general emails, right, that she knows her answers to, or clarification things that she can dive in and share with people if they want access for them, just so that it never stops moving. If I'm on a podcast, or if I'm loaded with end of week calls and sales calls today, like I don't have time to either have to check them in the morning or check them in the evening. But a lot of our clients are the same way, where they're working at Apple or they're working at Bank of America or a huge law firm, and they have someone processing their side legal deals so that they can on their tiny little firm. So
Yeah.
sometimes you have to juggle.
And there's advantages and disadvantages both ways, right? Like I think the
Mhm.
disadvantages are kind of obvious. You're restricted on how much time you have, but on the flip side, massive advantages, I'm kind of forced to be efficient, right? Like I'm like
Required.
every time I'm spending time on something, I'm deciding, is this the best use of my time? And I think when you have 60 hours, 70 hours that all you're doing is your business, you can be lazy with that and just do it all, right? So that's kind of an
Correct.
advantage. The other one, especially in real estate, that's nice is, I have to invest in every deal I do because I want to show my investors that, like, I believe in this. I'm putting my own skin in the game. I also sign on all the loans, and banks care about balance sheets and personal financial statements, and so being able to have a strong W-2 helps with that. So it's not necessarily something that I always need to have, but there are some benefits of doing the side hustle thing too.
No, when I first before I went out to my first startup, right? I had started companies before. Like I started a CNC milling company, for I would have a computer running all day in a CNC machine. cutting out lowers and uppers for AR-15s and 1911s, like handguns and rifles, like all day. I just print them and then I'd sell them in bulk
Oh,
at shows, and people would make custom firearms for them. I ended up selling that, but I started that in college for fun. But that was a one-person shop kind of, side hustle. But when I started working at Amazon, I also started. I was working like really weird hours with their FCs, and so I would work like 3 to midnight. And so, but in the morning time, I'd be at a startup all day. And so I waited until the startup world became too difficult to juggle, and then I was like, okay, Amazon, I got to let you go. This is showing more promise.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
and that's how it works, right? Too, which is great. I think when I first started this journey 5 years ago, I didn't expect it, to still be doing both. But frankly, I've gotten really lucky with some of the people we've hired. We've got some solid people that just have owner mindsets, care a lot,
great.
and they're better than me at most of what we're doing. So it just makes sense to let them run.
Yeah, I've refused to hire someone for a task that I'm better at than them.
Yeah.
That should never the case. Well,
Yeah.
what do
What's
you
the
what do
what's
you
that
do?
saying? If you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room,
Correct.
right? Like
Yeah.
hire better people around you. Yeah. That's
Yeah, my meetings, I like to sit in silence and then ask questions about the information being presented. And so I usually have other drivers on purpose because, if you're always driving, then, you have that center man complex of the company, and that's a dangerous place to be, to have one person that everything always passes through, every decision always goes through,
for
and then
sure.
you're the bottleneck. So never really a great thing. So you have a nice setup there. Um, in terms of Apple, what do you do at Apple? So you're on the finance side. I was in the retail, and then I went to the HR side
Okay.
of the retail. What do you do for Apple?
Nice. Yeah, I could see that from your LinkedIn and that's kind of what you did at Amazon too, pivoted with HR.
Right.
Yeah, so when I came over, so I started at American Express doing corporate finance and had started doing some Six Sigma projects in the corporate finance space. So it was like
Hmm.
I was doing finance, but started running some project management. Did the startup, got my MBA, kind of all at the same time. And then when I came to Apple, I initially started in a similar role that I was doing at American Express. So initially, what I was doing is I was managing this massive project budget. So I was the portfolio manager from like the capital the capital allocation standpoint. And what I was doing that actually like overlapped really well into real estate is I was doing a ton of underwriting. So people would have this project proposal and I would have to figure out, okay, if we're going to invest $4 million into that project, what's the ROI, right? Really, you're doing an internal rate of return and you have a benchmark that you're trying to hit. And this is like corporate finance 101, right? So
Yeah.
we'd have to hit a certain IRR over a few years to even consider proposing this project for something we would do, right? And so I was doing that across several $1 million budget, did that for a few years. And then over time, I've kind of just moved into new roles. So my most recent role is I'm managing a suite of internal applications on a product management standpoint. So still kind of have to deal with the finance side of it, but more product and project management, which again also lends to real estate as well, because there's so much you got to do with project management and make sure the user experience is good. And we're talking about how to make things consistent, and so anyway, it just overlaps quite a bit. But I will say one thing that like helped me get into this space is when I mentioned at the beginning when I was kind of talking about syndications about 7 years or so ago, I learned about syndications and started investing passively.
Mm.
And what I was doing is I was looking at people's like what they were filing from operating agreements, private placement memorandum, all the things that like are kind of the SEC required documents, as well as their underwriting. And I started realizing this isn't that complicated. This is stuff that I've had to do with my corporate background. And so I started volunteering to kind of work with some of these operators. So I said, hey, can I come in and just kind of look under the hood, learn from you, shadow you a bit, and I'll do your underwriting. And it turns out not very many people like doing underwriting. Like you strike me as somebody that likes being in Excel, but most people don't like being in Excel, right? Like, and I
Yeah.
I love it. I'm good at it, and it's just one of those things I enjoy doing, right? So I kind of became known as the underwriting guy, and I got passed around. A few sponsors referred me around, and so I got to know really fast how to do various types of underwriting between storage, industrial, retail, and of course mobile home communities. So from there, I started investing in my own mobile home parks with a partner, where we just kind of did a joint venture, bought some smaller ones, and then stumbled upon a larger portfolio that we decided to do as a syndication. So that was our first one, and that was in the Des Moines area. So it worked out well because my passive stuff was primarily in Kansas City. Bought a couple of smaller parks in the Kansas City market, and then kind of drew a three-hour radius from Kansas City to say where else can we expand to. So that's where we went to Des Moines, Springfield, Missouri, Western Kansas, and that's where our team's all focuses in that area. So that's worked out really well.
That's great, and that approach matches similar to another investor. Have you ever heard of acquisitions.com?
That sounds really familiar, but no,
Yeah,
it doesn't
so
ring a bell.
yeah, it's an interesting company. And the guy was doing a podcast, and he's like, "Yeah, I have like the most boring investment strategy that everyone wants to talk about." And they're like, "Well, let's sit here and talk an hour how you invest." He's like, "But really, it's only going to take about 5 minutes." And he's like, "I go to a town that's on a nice growth strategy, right? And it seems to be popping up and gentrifying and renovating the downtown." And he's like, "And then I drive 30 minutes from the center of town, and then I buy a bunch of land." He's like, "And then I wait 20
Wow.
years." So it's like, when they're turning it into suburbs, he's like, "I'm making 1,000x per acre." He's like, and that's my long-term investment strategy. Which if I look at like where I grew up in Charlotte, North Carolina, uh, where I lived as a kid, our first neighborhoods were over what used to be cornfields. It was surrounded by trees. You drive there now, it's a city. It doesn't
Yeah.
exist anymore. There is no farm or field anymore. It's all complex malls, hotels, and hospitals.
Yeah. I mean, I grew up in Salt Lake area. I'm up in Boise now, and both are the same way. It's like, it's just, you don't recognize them if you haven't been there in 20 years. So that's
Yeah.
interesting. I don't know that I would be that gutsy to do something like that. Because what if you choose the wrong direction, right? And 20 years is a long time to just sit and wait without any, but
No.
that's cool. It certainly is a strategy that obviously works.
Y-
Um,
You know, it's
so
it's interesting. My brother lives in Sandy. Are you familiar with
I
Sandy?
am, yeah. Yeah, I grew
Just
up near
south
there.
of Draper.
Yep.
And when he started going to his military, he's in the National Guard, and he starts going to the military there, which is right by the NSA base and everything now. Right,
That's
that
in
was
a
all that
Bluffdale,
was
yeah.
out there. Yeah,
Yeah.
that was
So
all that was out
Bluffdale is
there.
actually where I grew up, is Bluffdale. So I
Okay.
grew up
Oh
five
yeah. So
minutes from where that, and yeah, yep.
yeah. So, but you go there now, and it's like my brother's like, when I used to come out here, there was nothing. He's like, I used to drive 15, 20 minutes to get lunch from the military base. He's like, now they're putting in a new freeway
Yes.
right from the 15. It's crazy what happens in 10 years.
I remember, so again, same city that he's referring to there, and it's a very small town. I was actually looking at the statistics on that growth. And when I was there, when I was first growing up, there were 2,000 people in that community. It's almost 30,000 now, which doesn't sound like a lot, but but anyway, I remember being 12 and as a Boy Scout and going to city council meetings and fighting because that's what the adults were telling me to do, right? Like, we don't want new buildings in here. We don't know retail and stuff. It was just hilarious because that's all it is now. And that's obviously
That's
these
all
cities.
it is.
I know, it's just so funny. And the communities, like as an adult now, I'm like, well, duh, why was I fighting that? Like the communities need that. That's where their tax
Yeah,
revenue comes from. Like you can't get it from property tax. So
right.
anyway, it's wild how the growth happens. So
That's an interesting path, Breath. So when you're not running the future of mobile home parks and doing your day job, I see that you're married. How do you make time outside the world, right? You
yeah,
got a lot going. Much like me, you got a lot going on. Like, how do you balance it all?
yeah, I'm surprised this hasn't come up yet, but this is a shocker. I actually have 6 kids too.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So
So
mic
you are
drop
from
there for you.
Utah.
I am from Utah. That's right. I am from Utah. Yeah. So no, I happily married, 6 kids. We have our range is 3 to 12. How old's your son? Is he three-ish, two?
Two and a half. Yeah.
2.5.
Got one
Okay,
on the
yeah.
way.
So I don't know where the like terrible twos thing comes from. Three is way worse than two. Like it just is. So you're in for some fun. Um, it's like they just decide that they can do anything and they do not need your help and they will scream at you if you try to help them. So I mark my words, you'll see it, brother. But no, how do I make time? So honestly, this has been a struggle over the last few years. When I first got into this, and you can probably relate, I'm sure a lot of people can here that listen to this. There was some friction with my wife because I would get done with my day job and then immediately I'd spend 3 or 4 hours on my business, and then kids are going to bed, and then I'm back to working, right? And it was several months of conversations, and I finally realized this: I'm not happy, she's not happy, my kids aren't happy. And so the biggest thing I have is this focus time. So where possible, I shot off at 5, and I just am like really hard and strong on 5. And most of the time I can do it. It's only if I have like an important client meeting or something coming up after 5, or like obviously something with my day job that's after 5. But most of the time I can do it, and I just have like no technology. I'm not looking at my phone for 3 hours. We do dinner together, we play games together, we do whatever sport or dance is going on. We try to support, and then I'm back on at night. And so that's helped. That's made a huge difference where I can just like have that family focus, be present. The other thing, I've kind of hinted at this. We used to scramble a lot 3 or 4 years ago because it was just like felt we were always reacting, just always like spending so much time just like doing whatever the fire drill was of the day. And we have you heard of traction? I don't think I've heard that discussed in your podcast just yet. Have you, from Gino Wickman?
Traction.
Yeah, have you heard of that? Okay, so awesome book. You should read it.
Okay.
So it's by Wickman. It's called Traction. He has this concept of entrepreneurial operating system. And the idea is that it has sort of like, here's what your month looks like, and you do the same thing every month. And then here's what your week looks like. And what it boils down to is you have this weekly meeting that he calls the what does he call it? Level 10 meeting, which is just like the rating, because you're supposed to rate at the end of the meeting. And it's a 90-minute meeting, and every minute is accounted for. What's nice about this is it's the same agenda every week, so you don't have to like think too hard, right? But you spend some time talking about highlights for the week of like what are some wins we've had, what are some challenges. Then you look at your scorecard, so you've got to like really hone in what are the KPIs you're looking at. And then you look at your rocks or your goals for the year and the quarter. And when you're doing that, you're just saying, is it on track? Yes, no. You're not spending any extra time on it. And if it's not on track, you mark it to be discussed later in the meeting. If it is on track, you just skip it and just go. So you're spending like 30 minutes with this kind of stuff. And then the last hour is on what he calls IDS. So it's identify, discuss, and solve. And so any of the rocks that aren't on track or any other major issues that are like really big issues for the company that everybody in the company needs to be aware of, that's where you discuss what's the problem, what's what's kind of the underlying, like you're really trying to get to the root cause of the issue, and then you come up with tasks that are going to solve it. And the tasks should be 1 week tasks of what's going to happen the next week to drive this, right? And honestly, it's the best meeting of the week that we have, and it's the most important one for me to go to because I get the digest from like during that scorecard review. I see every single property we have in the portfolio. We look at all the KPIs that we especially focus on any that may be lower than we want them to be. We mark what are the issues we need to focus on, those kinds of things. So by doing that, and okay, so you do that at the corporate level, like your top maybe 5 people are in that meeting, but then you also cascade the same thing to all the other meetings. So we have a property management meeting. We in mobile home park business, you have to deal with homes, so we have a homes meeting. We have an investor relations meeting, and each one of those follows the same agenda. So we each do the rocks, we do the goals, we do the issue identification, all that kind of stuff. And it just streamlined everything. And we have that at every level of our business now 3 years later. It takes a while to implement it, honestly, because it's a whole cultural shift. But 3 years later, it's just things are so much simpler because I know where to focus, I know where to spend time, I know where the issues are, I know where they're not, and it's great. So that's helped a lot with my me time and my family time, just to know, hey, nothing's on fire. I can focus on my family right now. No.
That's good. Yeah, no, I'd have to say my calendar looks more like a food pyramid, and so it's I have an executive project manager who color codes and labels everything. Like I have my everyday meetings with her, my COO. I do weekly finance, but one of my favorite ones is my alignment meeting every Friday. I have it today. And that's where we start top down, like the different layers of their onions. Like have you done what I need you to do, right? Has your team done what you need them to do? Are we delivering the results and hitting the benchmarks that we set, last quarter or last week? And so we do a very similar thing. I call it my through and through because there's not a whole lot that doesn't touch everything.
Yeah.
A lot of the Venn diagrams that all overlap. It's like, oh, hey, listen, you two are operations and finance. Like, are you talking on the things that are in between you? And so we do that because I find that it helps me not to drop things. And then most of the week, if all goes well and there's not new surprising sales calls coming on my list, which, like today, like I have a couple last minute ones that popped up, I'm generally done at 3. And so 3
Nice.
give me a good time. I wake up at 5 a.m. because I trade Pacific Standard Time on the stock market. So I'll wake up at 5 way before my crew is up, and I'll tiptoe around and trade until about 8 o'clock. So I get a good hour and a half, 2 hours in to manage my positions, and then I stop what I'm doing and then I make breakfast. And so I get everyone's OJ and coffee, and I walk around. And it's so funny now when I walk into my son's room. He has some chairs and a little side table. Like if he likes to play on the side table, so he will clear his toys to make room for the food platter,
Oh wow.
right?
Nice.
And then he'll sit down. And so that's like my way of things really have to be a busy, out of the ordinary day for me not to make time for that and not to be generally done around 1 or 3. But I also go 7 days a week, and so I run 2 companies full time, and I do consulting, and so I'm a 7 day a week person. However, my days, if when they're light, I don't make do work for myself. Like some people have like a light day, and they're like, "What can I do to catch up?" I'm always caught up. I'm never behind. And so for that reason, I just like, oh, I have the next 2.5 hours for free. I'm not going to see what I can catch up on. I'm already caught up. I'm going to go see what the family's up to. So, let's
Yeah,
go check what they're doing.
I like that. That's cool.
Yeah, you
Yeah,
have to. You
that's
don't
good
make
setup.
if it's not a priority, it'll never get done. And so, I mean, you yourself working the full time and then running, a full scale fund it's a lot of work, and
It is.
it's commendable.
Yeah. No, thank you. I mean, like I was alluding to earlier, I was working like 80 to 100 hours a week when I first started, and that just that crushes you when you're trying to be spend time with family too. So yeah, having systems, having right people and seats, it makes a big difference.
Well, as an investor, I own a small equities company, small home office hedge fund that I funded with a previous exit. And, it's my hedge to my day. And so I run 3 things all day. Like I'm running, telehelping, I'm running the consulting pieces, and I'm running the investments, right? I only need one of them to fire, like just one of them. Right. I can have a horrible day at telehelping, and we have it. I started this year off, and we lost like week 1. As soon as people came back from vacation, I had 5 or 7 clients cancel into the new year. It's like,
Wow.
wow, really bad way to start off the new year
No
on
kidding.
telehelping.
Yeah.
Right? It's okay. I caught the downtick on the market coming into the new year, right? I shorted what they thought was going to be a Santa rally. So I did really well over here. So I'm like, 7 clients, I'll get them back. Right. And so
Right. Right. Yeah.
they'll come. Right. And or if I have the consulting side of things, like, if that's going real well, it'll hedge the other 3. So I don't really have too many eggs in one basket. And so, I'm a man of about 7 different sources of inflow, rental properties, annuities and things like that. And that way I don't have all this like, oh, if telehealth has a bad day or a bad week or a bad quarter, my world's over. Like, I don't know, something else will pick up the weight. Something else will make me
Right.
happy.
Right. Well, that lets you have the mind share or the mind space too to be able to be productive there too. Because if you're too like in the weeds as far as like almost wallowing in like crap, I got this has to work. On the one end, maybe you've got the motivation because it has to work, but really, I think it's you can. Gosh, we talked to our kids about this, right? I was talking to my 5-year-old the other day. If you're stressing and you're freaking out and you're panicking, you can't find the toy. You got to be able to relax and take a step back and then go in. And it's the same thing for us, right? Like if you're stressing, you're not going to find the problem. You're not going to be able to solve the problem without like being able to take a step back and relaxing about it. Um, one thing that's actually changed a lot of the way I think. I know I'm like a little scattered here, but a couple of years
No
ago, I
worries.
read a lot of the Stoic philosopher books, like Seneca, and like just kind of was like learning a lot about how like the biggest takeaway I have is you really need to focus on what you can control. So 7 clients dropped. You can't like go and beg and get them back. Like that just
Correct.
isn't gonna happen. But what you can control is the new levers you can do to go get new clients. Like you said, I'll get them back. And they've got these other things going on. So stoic doesn't mean you don't care. It means that you have like mellow and you can think and you can process. You're not panicking, right? And that's an everyday journey for me, at least, trying to figure that out. But it
Good.
helps a ton.
That's good. Well, Brett, one thing I told you I want to make sure we keep time for is, talk to us about how people listening who find what you're doing with your fund, I find incredibly interesting. Talk to us about how we get in contact, kind of what are, if you're willing to share, what are the minimums that someone needs to consider to get into something like what
Sure.
you're doing and how to get in touch with you.
Yeah, absolutely. So my website is suncrestcap.com, short for capital. So suncrestcap.com. Email address is Brett with two T's at suncrestcap.com. I'm also active on LinkedIn, so any of those ways you can get hold of us. Yeah, our minimum is typically $50,000. We do, because we follow lines, we have to have accredited investors, which means minimum income is of 250 a year or net assets of $1 million. And so if that's appealing, love to talk to you. Honestly, even for people that maybe doesn't hit yet, I'd still love to talk to you and help. One of the things that I think sets us apart, I grew up, but I have this whole background of why I chose finance, why I'm passionate about it. But like I grew up thinking I'd become a financial advisor and financial coach. I didn't end up doing that. I've met more down this corporate finance path, but coming into this has kind of given me a second chance to be that. And so I love talking to
Mm,
investors and talking about, okay, well, where are all your assets at? Does it make sense to maybe have some of it in real estate or other alternative assets? And so love talking to people just to kind of help with journeys there too. So I think that helps quite a bit, just to kind of know that we're friendly, we're here to help. Yeah, I think hopefully I answered the questions you just asked,
yeah,
but
I think one question, I mean, and just one clarification for me, I own portions of an LLC that own a greater, like, Van Goghs and Picassos, like blue chip
wow, nice. Yeah,
paintings, right? And so is that something like, say, if, a group of people who came together with an LLC type structure, would they be able to like summation that $50,000 to be involved in things like
totally.
that? Or is it, okay,
Yes.
cool.
Yeah, totally. So it's just the incoming investment would be 50,000, but yeah, you can cluster it as like your own LLC or special purpose entity to do that. Yeah, and we actually do have some funds come in that do that, or like family offices that will kind of pool funds for sure.
Great, wonderful. Well, Brett, I appreciate you so much for coming in today and chatting with us. What a fascinating profession that you find yourself in as a man of a large family as well. We don't know how you make the time to do it, but we appreciate you walking us through and sharing with us the overview of how you manage it.
Thanks a lot, Cody. Pleasure being here, and appreciate you hosting the podcast.
No, I appreciate you. And for all those listen, if you want to get in contact with Brett, please reach out directly to him. If for some reason you missed that and you just want to get in contact with us, we'll connect you as well. Just email us at info@telehelping.com, the sponsor for the podcast, and we'll make sure the connection takes place. Well, Brett, thank you again so much for your time, and we'll go ahead and sign off and let everyone have a good rest of their day.
Sounds good. Thanks, Cody.
Thanks, Brett.
Yeah, thank you, man. Good podcast, good interview.
This video was brought to you by our official sponsor, Telehelping. Need support for your business? Telehelping connects you with top-tier remote staff to help you streamline operations and fuel growth. Go to telehelping.com and get started today.